Hi, I'm Veronica and welcome to my channel. Today I would like to show you how you can massage your diaphragm, that big muscle that separates your chest from the abdomen and that helps you with breathing. It is your main breathing muscle. So if your diaphragm is somehow stuck, it feels frozen, it doesn't move as much as it should, if you massage it regularly, it might release and start moving more freely. And that will contribute to the more efficient breath, which will mean lots of oxygen coming to all of your organs. And also, it will improve your digestion and even improve your lymph flow, which has its effect on your immunity. If you haven't done it yet, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the notification button. I have plenty of videos on breath work and preparing your body for breath work, and there is a separate playlist for that, so don't forget to check it out. You will need props for this session. I would recommend getting a Pilates ball. I think it's something like 21 or 23 centimeter diameter Pilates ball. It's very useful for many things and it's not expensive. But if you don't have it, don't worry. You can use tightly rolled blanket or towel instead. And you will be lying down. So we'll begin shortly with releasing the tension from the back side of the body, for which you don't need any props. You can make your way down and begin by rolling slightly, very slightly, to the right and to the left, massaging already the back of the rib cage and that space just below it, which interests us today. And then you can land with your feet on the mat, somewhere where it feels comfortable, where the spine has all its natural curves. And the motor of the action I'm going to show you are your feet. So you're going to use the soles of the feet to push yourselves as if you're trying to slide your body up the mat, but it's not working because the mat is so sticky. So it's as if you wanted to slide yourself upwards, but it doesn't really happen because you stay roughly in the same place. So that is one movement, and the second movement is releasing it. So you're as if you're pushing away and then releasing, pushing away and releasing. And nothing else helps you. So you're not tensing up in your shoulders, you're not tensing up in the torso, not in the buttocks or anywhere else. The rest of the body is really, really floppy, everything very floppy. And just that action of pushing and releasing, pushing and releasing. So you can even imagine that I'm at the bottom of the mat and I push rhythmically your shins forward. So that creates that kind of rocking motion that is going to affect the whole back body fascia. And especially that you might feel all that back of the ribcage getting massaged all the way to the lower back even. And you know it's happening if your body responds to that. If you feel that up and down movement, at the same time feeling that everything is really soft. So only the feet do the real job, the rest is quite relaxed. And you can carry on with that movement for a while and then come to a stop. And actually it might be a good idea to check how is your breath at the moment and what moves as you breathe. So you might want to place one hand on the belly and one hand on the chest and notice if there's any movement underneath that hand that is resting on the belly. If there's any movement in the lower section of the rib cage. And if yes, in which direction it expands. Those are little things you can check to begin with. So now we're going to lie down on the side, and for that one, you're going to need your prop. If you have a Pilates ball, then don't keep it completely filled up with the air. Let it be slightly deflated so that it gives to touch more, gives underneath your weight. And if you're using a blanket, you're going to roll it quite tightly, blanket or towel, it doesn't really matter. Okay. And it will land underneath, just at the lower end of your ribcage, just at the lower end. So if you feel the ribcage, feel where it ends. And you're going to lie on the side. You can have arm over the head so that your head is more comfortable. You could also use a pillow if that is better for you. So you have a ball, it's gonna be bigger. So maybe you can even take like a bigger blanket so that it takes all of that space that is lower ribcage and maybe slightly lower than that, but definitely way above the hip bone. And as you are here, you can just spend some time noticing what happens as you breathe. You might notice that there is more space at the other end of the ribcage, that side that is facing towards the ceiling, that it expands more. But if you have a roll or a soft blanket, you might feel that you're kind of breathing into that soft space, slightly pushing into it when you inhale, and then releasing and softening your weight in a passive way when you exhale. And you don't really need to do much more than that. The only thing that you're going to introduce here is a very gentle roll, slightly forward and slightly backward. But you can do both when you're using the ball and when you're using a roll blanket. You can use the other hand for support so that you don't fall off your ball. Stay with that for a little bit longer. You might even notice how it would be to have that arm over the head and feel all that space on the other side of the ribcage opening. And then you can help yourself to remove whatever you have underneath you and check how it feels lying on the back. So do you notice any more space? Any new sensations? Anything moving now on either side of the ribcage as you place your hands there? And after you notice that, let's move on to the other side. So this time I'm going to show it to you with a blanket. It goes underneath the lower ribs, maybe just on the border. And then you can have the arm overhead so that you can prop your head comfortably. Blanket is long enough so that you have space to roll forward and backward. You can stay here first for a couple of breaths, observing the movement, both in that side of the rib cage that is open, that has all the space to expand outward and upward, and in that side of the rib cage that is breathing into that rolled blanket. So you feel almost as if it's moving against it when you breathe in, and then it softens and collapses and kind of melts into that blanket with all its weight when you exhale. And then you can start rolling a little bit forward and backward. You can even play with going slightly lower, hitting different spots each time. So just below the rib cage, and then you can go on that lower end of the rib cage. Notice the difference. And it might be stable enough to even add a little bit of an opening for that part of the ribcage that is facing outwards, upwards. So you might have the hand at the back of the head. As you open up a little bit that space when you roll backwards, and close it a bit when you roll forward. You might also check how it would be to have the arm overhead with all that space in that one side of the ribcage that is facing the ceiling. And again, after a while, prop yourself with the hands, remove the prop from underneath you, and lie down on your back to compare. You can place the hands on either side of the rib cage. Feel the breath expanding sideways. Hopefully now it starts to be a real movement that you can experience in your body. A sideways expansion of the lower end of the rib cage. And maybe in general the breaths travel lower. If before you experience it only in the upper chest, now you can really feel it lower in the lower end of the rib cage. And we're also going to try one more thing lying on the front. So again, you're going to need either a Pilates ball, which is not fully pumped, slightly deflated. And the more deflated it is, the less pressure it will be. So you can play with that a little bit. And you can use a folded blanket more, or a towel, more like a rectangle this time. It could be also a very small, longish cushion, but it would have to fit in the space between your ribs and your hip bones in this case. So let me show it with the ball first. there will be two places you're going to have it over the belly button, and it might sound weird as we're talking about breathing, but the fascia has connections that go to the abdomen. So if you release the abdomen, it is going to affect your breathing. So the very first spot will be exactly over the belly button, and the other one will be higher, and that will be more towards your solar plexus, so in a straight line upwards. Let's start with the belly button. And I would suggest to begin on forearms, because if you're on the forearms, you can manipulate how much pressure you want to place, how much of your weight you want to place on that ball. So if you've never done that and you carry a lot of tension in your abdomen, the first time you do that, it might feel very weird and maybe even sore. That's why it's better to begin on the forearms. Now, the body has this natural reaction to contract in a protective pattern. So as much as possible, see how much you can soften around that ball. Soften around it by softening your belly itself, but also your buttocks, your pelvic floor, as you might notice that all those places got clenched the moment you felt that pressure under your belly. And if it feels perfectly comfortable for you, you could go lower and you can rest with all your weight on that ball. But if you're feeling pain or discomfort, there is no point to push it, because your body will be holding against it, will actually create more pressure, and that's not what we want. Let me just show it with the blanket. If you're using the blanket, you place it between the lower ribs, just below the lower ribs, and you can say between the lower ribs and the hip bones. And you rest over it. So it's going to feel much less intense, but it will still have its effect. You might choose something like a more tighter or rolled up blanket, or really tightly folded blanket, or if you have a pillow that is roughly that size, it actually, and it's a harder cushion, it might actually give you a little bit more of that pressure. So see what's going to work for you. And wherever you were, encourage with every exhalation your body to soften a little bit more. Whatever can soften your buttocks, your legs, your back, your belly. And give your weight down, melting around your prop, whichever prop you have chosen. Sometimes you might experience a pulse, some pulsations, no pulsation, and that is okay. You should not worry about that. When you felt that you have softened quite a bit around your prop, and it might take anything between 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, you can move a little bit higher up towards the area of your solar plexus if you're using a ball. And again, it might be like, oh, this one is actually feeling intense again. So feel free to come back to being more upright and to stay on the forearms to begin with. Or maybe to stay here all the time if you experience any discomfort or pain. I have not mentioned that, but hopefully it is obvious by now that it is not a good idea to eat before doing this particular practice. So definitely better on an empty stomach. So you might feel like going down and kind of melting around that bowl. And especially if you're lying on the blanket, you might experience that there's that extra space at the back of the lower end of the lungs. And you have space to expand the breath outward and upward, so breathing more to the back of the lungs. And after you stay here for some time, you can roll to the side to remove that roof from underneath you, and then roll directly onto your front for a moment. And as you're there, notice maybe some new softness or sensation of melting a little bit more into the ground. How does it feel? What do you notice about the breath when you inhale? What expands? What releases and softens when you exhale? And then come back to lying on the back with the knees bent and feet on the mat. One hand on the belly, one hand somewhere on your lower chest, lower part of the rib cage. And again, observe how your breath is. Do you notice any change? Do you notice any movement underneath that hand that is resting on the belly? Underneath that hand that is resting on your lower rib cage? How is the quality of this breath, its pace? Maybe even this position changed and you feel like you can somehow rest more comfortably on the ground. Whatever there is to notice, notice it now. Stay with the aftertaste of this simple massaging session for a couple of breaths more. And then eventually you might stretch and yawn. Roll yourself to one side. Stay in that curled position for a moment before you give the weight for the hands to come up. And choose any comfortable seated position. It doesn't need to be cross-legged. You could even sit with your feet on the mat or sit on your heels. It really doesn't matter. You could use a blanket to sit higher, but just so that for a moment, or you could even stand up, but for a moment feel how's that breath now when you're in an upright position. And do you notice that 360-degree expansion if you place your hands on the lower rib cage with fingers in the front and thumbs at the back? I made one video on 360 degrees, so you can check it out. Have you noticed any difference in terms of sensation, in your torso or in terms of your breath and breath quality after this massage? If so, let me know in the comments. I'm going to start very soon a course called Breathe Well, Live Well. It is an online course that combines live sessions with me and a pre-recorded material on a learning platform. If you are a shallow breather, if you run out of breath quite easily, if you experience a lot of stress, carry plenty of tension in the neck and shoulders, if you experience anxiety, if you have problems with digestion, all of those are good reasons to join this course. If you'd like to join the waiting list, there will be a link in the description below. Have a good day and see you next time.